It's a sad day here at the Recap Center. This is your Week 9 recap, but it's a sad day for global reasons that you might already be aware of. But it's a sad day because we have to say goodbye to a fantasy owner. It's never a satisfying thing when we have to kill one of our own. You see, because if this fantasy season was all conducted out in the wilderness, and throughout all these weeks, we're traveling the lands and we're eating off the fat of the land, you know, somehow still having our Wi-Fi connected to find out who wins and who loses. And through all these wins and these losses, we find out who the weaker people are and the stronger people are. At this point, we would all come together and we would all say, it's time to fucking kill Joe. No, don't cry. Don't stop. Stop crying. This is hard enough for me. So we would say, we gotta kill Joe. And we gotta kill Joe because he's 1-8. You know, he's 1-8 and okay, he's 1-8 and he's out of it. I mean, he was probably out of it weeks ago, but I just didn't want to do the math. But we mourn his death today. We've got to kill him because he's becoming a liability. I mean, at this point, maybe he's losing a foot. He's got like 7 fingers. What started with a innocent and optimistic first-round draft pick of Adrian Peterson has ended in sheer, full-out fucking terror. Joe's season has been a disaster. Up to this point, his team has managed to score 601 points. That's an average of 66 points per game. Now, I looked at the pay. Stop. You're going to stop it. I looked at the papers. And in 2014, when Joe had his historic season, my mascara is coming off. When he had his historic season of 1-12, at this point in week 9, Joe was also 1-8. So he's on pace, but he's behind a little bit. So this season could quite possibly be worse because at this point, Joe had managed 649 points, which by his average in 2016 almost means he's missing a whole entire week worth of scoring, 49 points or 50 or whatever. So he was averaging 72 points per game at that point. Now, by the end of the season, he managed to get 951 points in that 2014, that historic 2014 season. Will Joe manage to break that points record and tie his 1-12 record? It remains to be seen, but Joe's loss isn't much of a surprise to us. We always knew that Joe didn't have a chance. We look at the waiver order, and much like that 2014 season, I've spoken to the commish about this. You could basically see Joe ahead of you in the waiver order, and you could just skip an order and move yourself up a slot because he's not going to make a pick, which hasn't been the case with Hensel. Not entirely, at least. Hensel's changed that, but it's definitely been the case with Joe. Countless weeks when he's supposed to make a move, he normally makes it probably Thursday or Friday instead of picking up the high-quality people that Wednesday morning. So his loss comes as to no surprise to us, but we salute you, Joe. Another season, you kind of tried, I guess. Stop fucking crying. All right. You guys know what this is. You guys know what the fuck this is. Like I said, this is your Week 9 recap. Let's stop with all the sad shit because this is not a sad moment in the season. This is a season that is picking up. It's picking up momentum, and everything is becoming more and more interesting. Why is everything becoming more and more interesting? Well, if you shut the fuck up, I will tell you. The Caporal League, the El Caporal League division, has a 4-way tie. Nobody wants this division. Nobody wants it. It's like that scene in Varsity Blues where the father's, complaining about, why don't you go play football? And the kid turns around and says, I don't want your life. I don't want your division. I don't want it. But here, I don't want it. I want you to have it. These 4 individuals don't want it. Okay? We've got a 4-way tie between Pedro with a point total of 850, Paul with a point total of 844, right behind him, Andy with a point total of 824, and Hensel with a 781 total. Hensel, out of this whole crew, as you would imagine, I think is the pretender. I think Hensel is the one out of this whole tie. And after the next coming weeks, the men will separate themselves from the boys. Don't forget this, guys. Don't ever forget this, okay? Don't forget this. Everything in fantasy is about, it's about the war of attrition. It's about lasting throughout the whole process. You can always start out good, but only time will tell if you remain that way, if you manage your team to keep your team that way. Much like the draft, which, in my opinion, doesn't really start until maybe the 6th round. The first, second, third, fourth, and fifth, those are all kind of obvious. They become more and they become less and less obvious. That knot begins to unravel itself after maybe like 2, 3, 4, and then it becomes an open-ended selection process, and then it really goes into fucking place after the 5th or 6th round. Like, that's when you really make your real picks, and that's when your real fantasy knowledge comes in. Hensel is the pretender in this whole crew. And I say that because, not just because it's, he's got a total of 781. That would be most of what I'm basing my opinion on. But it's also because of the fact that, for example, you've got somebody on Hensel's squad that he's been playing all these weeks, Willie Snead. You've got Willie Snead from the New Orleans Saints, and Willie Snead hasn't really done shit. He's over the past month, he's gotten a point total of 4, 8, 5, and 3. No, there have been some instances where he got the ball, a high level amount of times, 6 and 9. But Willie Snead is just really there to fill up a roster spot for Hensel. There's levels to all of this. And now that he's moved up to the level of, I'm going to update my team, I'm not going to leave any empty slots. Now it's to determine the quality within those slots. Are you just putting somebody there because, hey, he's a Drew Brees wide receiver, or is he there because he's a quality wide receiver? I mean, if he had options this week, he'd be able. Well, we'll get to Hensel's options in a second. But that is the example of why I feel that Hensel is the pretender within the crew. It's not just he's moved past the Joe stage. He's moved past not caring about updating his team. Now it's just a blind selection process where it's like, well, okay, that guy's projected to get that, and all right, that's it. He's on there. And you got to imagine that moving forward, he won't be able to discern what quality is and what a bullshit selection is. So you got a 4-way tie, and it's getting pretty interesting, of course, because I defeated Hensel. But we'll get to the point totals. We'll get to the scores in a bit. And you had Andy, who also got a victory. Pedro, who's lost his last 4 games. And I guess if nobody wants a division, Pedro's the first one on the line saying, I don't want it. I don't want it. It's a collapse. Now, I'll tell you, with a record of 3-6, you guys joked. You guys laughed at me. Oh, you did. You were having your fun. You were dancing on my dead carcass. But with a record of 3-6, all it takes is yet another victory this week, and I'm right back in this thing. Well, I'm in this thing now. Maybe not in terms of winning the division, which is still a possibility, but in terms of getting in the playoffs, it's still a very realistic thing. I don't necessarily have to win out, I don't think, because we've got so many people going up against each other, and everybody's it's crabs in a bucket at this point, which is working into my favor. The next item that I want to move on to is I want to give somebody credit. You don't do this too much on the recap, but you got to give credit when it's due. It's probably been because of Ed's Ed's 8-0 run that you tend to not see other people behind him because his record was so good. But Eric's having a very good season. Eric's having an excellent season with a record of, see if I can look it up here, with a record of 6-3. Ewok Rape is doing pretty good, and there's 3 great performances that he's been getting for the past month. He's getting momentum from these 3 players. Aaron Rodgers is performing like Aaron Rodgers is supposed to perform. Over the last month, the last 4 weeks, Aaron Rodgers has put up 11 touchdowns. He's gotten a score of 11, 23, 33, and 25. Now, you've got to imagine that this week going up against the Tennessee Titans, it's just going to be another 20-something, another 30-something performance. The other reason why Eric's team is doing so good is DeMarco Murray, who surprisingly, his numbers have been solid as shit. There hasn't been one single-digit performance. In fact, his lowest point total was a game in which he scored 12 points, but he managed to get a touchdown in that game. And that was over the past month, where DeMarco has also managed to get 4 touchdowns. 1 touchdown every last one of these weeks, with also 200-yard performances. And surprisingly, his third contributor, at least over the past 3 weeks, has been Matt Forte, who, through weeks 3, 4, 5, and 6 was looking like he just had no shot at being the Matt Forte of old. But over the past 3 weeks, he's managed to put up 25 points, 21 points, and 15 points, and scoring a total of 4 touchdowns along the way. So these are the reasons why Ewok Rape has been making the run that he's been making. The only thing that you would wonder at this point is, okay, everything is clicking on all cylinders. On all cylinders, you've got everything going. What happens if one of the wheels falls off of that train? That's the only thing that you could assume, because his team is performing to its highest level. As opposed to Ed. Ed's team was he lost this week, but Ed's team was doing what it was doing, but it was never performing at its highest level because of what I described before, which is a shitty running game that Ed has. So I'm not necessarily saying Eric has the best team, but right now his team is certainly performing like it is, but let's see what happens from here on out. Let's get to these. Let's get to these final scores of Week 9, shall we? I defeated Hensel by a final score of 105-86. Orlando, the highest point getter in Week 9, with 148 fucking points to Paul's 93. 148 points. I mean, I just want to read you the stat line because it looks sexy. 26 points from Russell Wilson, 28 points from Mark Ingram, 31 points from Ben Gordon, 11 points from LaShawn McCoy, Dante Moncrief, which sounds like a lady's product, Moncrief, scores 11, Michael Thomas with 19, Kyle Rudolph with 6, 11 from the Chargers defense, and a shitty performance by Dan Bailey with 5. But 148 points nonetheless to Paul's 93. And Paul, well, we'll get to him in a second. Ewok Rape destroys Joe by final score of 140-55. Joe is once again the lowest scoring team of the week. Pedro loses to Andy by a final score of 103-91, and Jay beats Ed 100-71. Now, moving on to these Week 10 matchups, and the biggest matchup, what I've been just dying to get to this whole time, is the matchup between Hensel and Paul. Hensel he's in trouble. Hensel's in trouble, and he's up for a Pedro-esque sort of a fall here, because Andrew Luck is on his bye week. Now, this is go time here. This is go time. Hensel will probably, and this would be a mark of Hensel's, this would be a mark of Hensel's negligence, would be the fact that he would probably start Joe Flacco against the Cleveland Browns tomorrow, because Joe Flacco is on his bench. What I think would be a better option would be to look in this player pool and to dig up maybe a Jameis Winston against the Chicago Bears. He can go for Carson Wentz, Carson Wentz hasn't been performing great over the past month. I'll give you that. But he's going up against the ATL defense, who's the worst ranked defense. And you got to imagine that it's always going to be a fucking shootout whenever you're facing the Falcons defense or that Saints defense, huh? Jay? Huh, Ed? That Saints defense? Yeah, so there are better options for Hensel in the player pool, but you got to imagine that Hensel's negligence is just going to say, well, what's on my bench? Okay, that's it. Fill the slot. Once again, this is exact point that I made with Willie Snead, and it's just to fill up a gap and not to look for the best possible quality that you can get at the time. Now, I'm not saying that Paul's necessarily going to walk away with this one either, because the production that he's been getting out of Todd Gurley has been fucking anemic. Todd Gurley, his number one pick over the past few weeks, 14, 8, 8, and 6. Dare I say that what I said about Paul and Todd Gurley, I think was week 2 when he decided to start LeGarrette Blount when Todd Gurley went up against the Seahawks. Dare I say that Paul just needs to maybe take an L on Todd Gurley. And just start LeGarrette Blount, because it's pretty much looking like all value is out of the window and you just have to make the playoffs now. You're not going to get anyone for Todd Gurley. The point of trading him, I guess if there was any point where Paul could have sold high was after week 5, after Gurley had managed to get 1 touchdown against the Buffalo Bills, and he scored 14 points. Todd Gurley has 3 touchdowns this whole entire season, folks. 3 touchdowns. Now, I just told you that within the last 4 weeks, DeMarco Murray has 4 touchdowns for Eric. I just told you that Matt Forte has 4 touchdowns for Eric. Matt Forte. Now, if that isn't getting value at a low price, then I don't know what is. And getting no fucking value at a high price for Gurley at this point. So you have to imagine that the economics of a player goes right out of the window when he's sort of shown you that he's not going to be a peak performer this year. Now, whether that be on him or his offensive line or his quarterback, they just loaded the box because he sucks. Whatever. Case Keenum sucks dick. But you have to look at the situation in a logical way, and right now it's not. He's projected to get 11 points. You know, that's a possibility there. But LeGarrette Blount is, he's just sitting there, sitting pretty. 4 touchdowns, 5 touchdowns. I'm sorry, the last month or so. So Paul might want to do something about that. Now, the other disappointing factor about Paul's team is Brandon Marshall. Brandon Marshall was his 3rd pick. And over the past 4 weeks, Brandon Marshall has managed to get 7 points, 3 points, 6 points, 4 points. Fucking nothing. He hasn't done anything. And it hurts. He picked up Mike Evans, I think, the round after he picked up Brandon Marshall. So he's getting a lot more quality out of him than he is out of his number 1 wide receiver pick. I do think, and I'm going to make a prediction here because I'm so interested in this matchup because, I've got a lot to do with this, because moving forward, I'm going to fucking I'm going to fucking pass both of these motherfuckers. But I would say that Paul's got the advantage because I do believe that Hensel's just going to pick Joe Flacco, who has the potential to get 20-something points. It's possible, but I think there's a higher ceiling for other players in the pool. Hensel's just going to throw him up there. He's going to keep somebody like Willie Snead there. I fucking hope that he takes Rob Gronkowski off of his bench, who's, currently, because he had a bye last week. I hope he takes him off of his bench and puts him and takes Jason Witten off. The rest of the matchups this week, Pedro, sorry about the sirens. Pedro against me. Pedro's lost 4 in a row, and it's probably looking like it's going to be 5. If Pedro loses again this week, this is going to be one of the greatest meltdowns we've ever seen before. Somebody who started off with such a good record, and he's just sucking dick now. You've got Andy versus Joel. Great. Andy gets an easy victory there. You've got Turtle Power against Ed, and you've got to like Orlando's chances. You've got to like Orlando's chances in this game because Ed's going to continue to be exposed for what I said. He's going to continue to be exposed for his soft running attack. For the fact that it's only going to get softer and more questionable. It's only going to get more softer once Christian Michael doesn't necessarily become the first option. When this fucker comes back, the shitty guy who fucking got injured I'm not even gonna mention his name. Ryan Matthews, who, if we're going with this theme of looking back over the past month, he's got 6 points, 5 points, 7 points, 7 points. His yardage is 60, 56, 10, 15. He's getting less and less carries. If Ed wouldn't have concentrated so much on being condescending to the rest of the league and offering up his best offensive player in AJ Green, he would have actually been able to make a move or two to get himself a better running attack, because it doesn't seem to be happening right now. And that's why I think Turtle Power is going to get the victory here, because he has such a strong running attack. I mean, fucking Melvin Gordon is tearing it up, and fucking David Johnson is who the fuck he is. You got to imagine that Russell Wilson going up against the New England defense has the potential to get way more points than Drew Brees does up against the Denver defense, who performed poorly last week. They did. They definitely did, but that was more of a running attack, more than a passing attack. Will Ed play the Denver defense against New Orleans? I don't think so. Not if he's expecting Drew Brees to get 30 points and he's expecting his defense to get what? I'm not sure. So I think Ed is going to take a second L there. So the rest of these matchups, as I said, Paul against Hensel, and the very last one is Eric against Jay. So this was your Week 9 recap. This was a pretty long one. We mourned the death of Joe. We gave Eric some credit. We addressed the tense and the escalating situation in the Caparel division. And, of course, the escalating situation is that Bundy is coming. Okay? And we also, fucking put our dicks in Paul's ass and Hensel's ass as well. So, as always, may your quarterbacks get hurt before they get out of the locker room. May your running backs pull their calf muscles. And may your wide receivers get arrested for marijuana possession. Go fuck yourselves.